Hello, and thank you for joining us here at the Toronto Centre for Canine Education. This is our general orientation that we require all of our new students to watch for a couple of reasons. One being that we want you to be an educated consumer before you commit, and because there's so much information that needs to be conveyed before joining a training program, it's much easier to do that from the comfort of your own home rather than taking up precious class time or private lesson time where we could be working on hands-on training. My name is Karen Lyles, and I'm the owner and head trainer here at the TCCE. We have a fantastic team of trainers who are held to the highest standards. Each one of us is certified at least once through a reputable school or association that is completely science-based and recommended by veterinary behaviorists all over the world. All of our trainers must complete at least 10 hours of continuing education each year in order to ensure that we are up to date in our knowledge of animal behavior, canine body language, learning theory, psychology, and husbandry. The standards that our trainers meet far exceed industry standards. We are also pleased to be able to refer you to trusted services such as veterinarians, groomers, boarders and pet sitters, as well as dog walkers and even veterinary behaviorists and other specialists. As you may be aware, the training industry is completely unregulated, which is extremely concerning, and this is something that we're working towards changing. This means that anyone can be a dog trainer, so it's important to question the advice that you're given, whether it's from a well-meaning individual in a dog park, a hobby trainer, or even a professional trainer. If at any time you feel uncomfortable with the advice that you're given or the way you or your dog are being treated, you must be an excellent advocate and speak up in the moment. Any professional will respect your boundaries and work with you in order to find an approach that you might be comfortable with. Our goal here at the TCCE is to be able to help both species work together to understand each other and to communicate much better with ease. Only then can a true relationship be built and maintained. Dogs and humans differ quite dramatically in communication styles. We use spoken word in various languages, dialects, and accents. We have gestures and even sign language. You may have already noticed in your interactions with dogs that communication from one species to another can be very confusing and even frustrating. Communication is the number one reason we dog trainers are called upon for assistance, and there are no limits to the depth of expectations, realistic or not, that we place on our dogs. Once we're able to understand our dogs better, the communication becomes easier. But isn't that the truth in all species? Communication is a two-way street. No longer is it acceptable to expect a dog to do something just because we say so. This implies force, intimidation, an unhealthy relationship built on power and control. So why understand body language and behavior? Because it creates a deeper level of understanding of your dog. It creates clearer communication between both of you. It creates better choices, better behavior, and less frustration. We are starting to understand and recognize that dogs are sentient beings who are individuals with personalities, likes and dislikes, fears and anxieties, and various motivations or reinforcements. They make choices and change their minds just as we do. They can be excellent communicators just like some people, and they can have social deficits like some people. So how do dogs communicate? They use body language and vocalizations. We know that when a dog pins their ears or tucks their tail, they're feeling fearful. But did you know that if a dog rolls on his back when meeting a new person or dog, they're not asking for a belly rub, they're asking to be left alone because they're too nervous for this interaction. Does that come as a surprise to you? Dogs also use vocalizations in order to communicate, and there are so many different kinds. As you get to know your dog, you will get to know what each vocalization means. For example, howling might be your dog trying to match a sound in the environment, such as music or a siren. Or it could be howling because they're lonely. A lower toned bark may be a warning or an alert, whereas a higher pitched staccato bark may be fear or anxiety, or something in the middle may be attention seeking or demanding. The bottom line is that dogs do not come pre-programmed with English, French, Spanish, Italian, or any other language. So when we chant off repeatedly, they don't actually know what that means unless we've taught them exactly what we want them to do when we use the word off. Dogs use their senses, such as smell, sight, and sound, in order to process information in the environment. Using each of these senses, dogs are constantly assessing their environment and any stimuli they encounter to decide whether they are safe or unsafe. A dog's sense of smell is significantly greater than ours. You might have noticed that when dogs greet each other, they tend to sniff the other dog's backside and genitals, and even their face. This is in order to gather important information such as whether the other dog is male or female, young or old, healthy or unhealthy, relaxed or stressed. They also spend a lot of time outside investigating various surfaces, especially soiled surfaces. This is how they leave messages for one another, which I affectionately call P-mail. They can gather a lot of information about the other dog just from urine or feces. Let's consider this their Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Dogs will also use their sight in order to assess their environment and read body language and physical cues. Some dogs have better sight than others, for example, sighthounds who are bred to see from great distances. You may have already heard that dogs have 7 times the hearing that we have, and while I think that's a very loose calculation, it's important to recognize that dogs do have very sensitive hearing and they have a wider range than we do, so they can hear much higher pitch and much lower tones. Play signals are used to invite or accept play from another. It's also a heads up that the next thing that they're about to do is non-threatening. Basically, I'm about to joke with you. I'm not being serious. We're looking for loose, wagging tails, relaxed ears out to the side or high up and back, which we sometimes call sexy ears. A nice, soft, open mouth, soft eyes, perhaps a raised paw, sometimes even a paw swipe. Their tongue might be hanging out, and their movement is bouncy. Sometimes dogs will hump as part of play or body check another dog. Sometimes they'll even use vocalizations like growling, barking, or gurgling. Some dogs will have raised hackles when they're playing, but it doesn't mean fear or aggression. It's more like excitement or goosebumps, if you will. Now let's look at play between puppies. As you can see in this video, all the puppies are very loose and relaxed and bouncy and goofy, and these are the things that we're looking for in play. You'll notice there's a lot of biting as well, which is actually very normal in play at any age. It's how dogs play. Now when they're puppies, their teeth are sharp but their jaws are weak, so they don't tend to do damage in play. It's also how they learn how hard is too hard to bite. They rely on feedback from the other dog or the other puppy in order to adjust how hard they bite in play, and this is what makes great players as they get older. Here are some images of relaxed, happy dogs. Take note of their ears, their eyes, their mouths, and if you can see their tails in these images, how relaxed they are. They're not high over their back, straight, pointing up, or tucked tight underneath. Did these dogs look relaxed and happy to you? These are dogs who are either displacing, disengaging, or offering cutoff signals. Displacement signals are often used to divert attention to something else, like sniffing the grass or investigating something that's not terribly interesting at the moment as a way to take off the social pressure or avoid whatever interaction that is causing them stress. We often misunderstand these dogs when they're offering these signals, and we label them as stubborn or say, "My dog is ignoring me." This is not exactly what's happening. It's generally a mild sign of stress and avoidance. These dogs are showing signs of fear, anxiety, or stress. You'll see that their ears are pulled back, tail is low, often tucked, their head is lowered or craned back, their eyes are focused and hard. Perhaps they're yawning, licking their lips, or doing a full body shake off. These are all signs of fear, anxiety, and stress. When fear, anxiety, and stress escalate, this is what the warning looks like. Dogs will often lower their head, harden their stare. Perhaps they'll show all their teeth. There might be some barking, lunging, growling, perhaps even some snapping. They might become more forward or offensive in their body language. These dogs are not what we would consider aggressive per se or bad. These are dogs who are simply past their threshold, trying to create space or distance between themselves and the trigger. We often consider this behavior bad, but the truth is, it's emotion, and it's very clear information that the dog needs space and does not want to engage in conflict unless they're forced to. So this is something to keep in mind. Here's a really great image of what the ladder of aggression looks like. When a dog is feeling uncomfortable, they will escalate in behavior. They might start from blinking slowly, yawning or licking their nose or lips, perhaps turning their head away, trying to avoid, turning their whole body away, perhaps sitting and lifting a paw. Then they might escalate to perhaps walking away and avoiding the conflict. However, if they're not able to get away from whatever it is that's stressing them out, they might pull their ears back and start to creep, perhaps. Their body gets lower and crouched. Their tail might tuck under. Some dogs will lie down and lift their legs up as a way of sort of showing their belly and saying, look, I'm not here for a conflict. I'm really uncomfortable and I'd like this to stop. Now, if in this zone they're really not being listened to by whatever it is that's threatening them, whether it's another dog or one of us, they might stiffen up. They might offer some direct eye contact and staring. They might growl. Then they can escalate to snapping. And then last but not least, biting. One thing to keep in mind is as they move into that yellow to red zone where there's maybe some stiffening, some staring and growling, that's where we humans tend to punish our dogs and we say, hey, or or no. And this is unfortunate because what ends up happening is we end up kind of taking the batteries out of the smoke detector and we're saying, I'm going to punish this behavior that I think is bad. But what the dog is actually learning when we punish that behavior is that they shouldn't exhibit that behavior. So they go from perhaps crouching, tucking their tail or lying down to stiffening up. And then they skip the growling, the snapping, and the obvious warnings, and they go right to the bite. And that's really, really unfortunate. And it's how a lot of dogs end up because we humans tend to be pretty big into punishment. If we look at our legal system, we know that's true. So it's important not to take the batteries out of the smoke detector. We want that warning. We might not like the growling and the barking and the snapping and the lunging, but it's important to keep it intact so that your dog uses it to warn that they might be about to bite as opposed to skipping right to the bite. This is something that we can modify. If your dog is growling about something and it's not in play, speak to us directly. Let us help you before it escalates to a bite. Here are some really fantastic resources for learning about your dog's body language. There's an app called Dog Decoder, and it's available on Android and iOS systems. Two websites that we strongly recommend you check out are I Speak Dog and Doggone Safe. If you want to pause the video for a second and take note of these, please do. So how do dogs learn? Dogs learn the same way anything else with a brain learns. And so if we look at these images here, you might recognize these gentlemen. On the left, we have Ivan Pavlov, and on the right, we have B.F. Skinner. So these concepts might be very familiar to you. Dogs learn through classical conditioning, which is Pavlovian conditioning, or learning by association. The bell rings, and Pavlov feeds the dogs. And he repeats this 3, 4, 5, 6 times until eventually the bell ringing is a predictor of the food. So the dogs will start to salivate when they hear the bell. Let's look at classical conditioning in the real world. You're walking down the street with your dog, and out of nowhere appears a construction worker. Immediately you reach into your pocket and you feed your dog a piece of cheese. This is wild, thinks the dog. That was great. You keep walking. The construction worker is no longer in sight. A couple of minutes later, you pass another construction zone and your dog notices a construction worker. You immediately reach into your pocket and feed him another piece of cheese. You keep moving. You walk into your lobby of your building, and standing there is a construction worker. Immediately you feed your pup another piece of cheese. Your dog starts thinking, wow, this is really crazy. Every time I see a construction worker, cheese happens. So how do you think your dog is going to feel, and what do you think they're going to do the next time they see a construction worker? They're going to feel pretty happy about it. They're going to be excited, perhaps anticipating something delicious coming from you. This is classical conditioning. Construction workers and cheese don't naturally have anything to do with each other, but if you pair them in the right way by producing the food just after your dog notices the construction worker, then they start to pair these two things together, and that's associative learning or Pavlovian conditioning. Here's a great example of how we use this in our training. Misfit is a beautiful dog who is really fantastic with people. However, when she sees another dog, she gets really stressed out and starts to bark and lunge. So we want to modify this behavior.
Excellent. Don't worry about that for the time being. We're getting excellent video footage. I'm actually loving it just for that reason.
Oh, she'll give you some good food. This is the part of the class I've been waiting for.
Just good. And close the bar. Good. Nice loosening of the leash there. Good. As hard as it is,
I know that's
it's very difficult for all of us.
Nice catch.
Close the bar. Yes, that was amazing.
Wow, nice timing. You're gonna be a decoy dog in no time.
Oh, my chicken.
So in that video, you'll notice that in the beginning, Misfit was really stressed out, barking, lunging, jumping. And as soon as she notices the dog, Amy reaches into her pocket and starts feeding cheese and hot dogs, all the things that Misfit loves the most. As soon as the dog goes away, out of sight, the feeding stops and Amy is really boring for about 30 to 60 seconds. No food happens in that time. As soon as the dog shows up again, Amy reaches into her pouch and starts feeding that hot dog and cheese again. The dog goes away, the food stops. Very depressing. So we repeat this pattern so that Misfit starts to learn really quickly that when the dog appears, amazing things happen regardless of her behavior. So she doesn't have to do anything to get the food. She's actually just getting fed because the dog is showing up. Now, over time, what ends up happening is, as you noticed, her barking goes away. That's a byproduct of her emotion. We don't worry about that for now. When we're using classical conditioning, it's all about creating associations. We're not using food as a reward, we're using it to associate with something kind of spooky so that we can change that emotion and therefore change the behavior. If every time a dog shows up, meatballs rain from the sky, your dog will start to really get excited and anticipate dogs showing up. Eventually, we don't have to do this anymore, and we can start asking for behavior and rewarding it. But for now, Classical conditioning is a really great way of changing emotions and therefore changing behavior associated with those emotions. Let's talk about operant conditioning, also known as learning by consequence. This is where food is used as a reward as opposed to using food as a way to associate two things. Consequences drive behavior. We know this. So let's look at what happens if you ask your dog to sit. Your dog sits, and immediately you start to praise them and perhaps give them some delicious treats. What ends up happening is your dog's sitting behavior then will increase in frequency because they were well rewarded for that. Now let's look at a troublesome behavior. Your dog jumps on people as soon as they come in the house, and it drives you up the wall. So you coach your friends and your family to do something very specific when they come over. Your family member walks in the house, your dog jumps on him, and immediately your family member turns their back and walks away. What happens in your dog's mind is he realizes that jumping on people is going to make them walk away, so that jumping behavior decreases. So you can see how if there's a good consequence according to the dog, then the dog will continue offering that behavior. If there's a consequence that's negative to the dog, then the dog will stop offering that behavior. What you'll notice here is that we're not using punishment in the traditional sense. We are punishing the behavior of the dog jumping by removing the reward, and that's perfectly acceptable. However, we're not going to hit the dog or kick the dog or do anything that's harmful or aversive. We're simply going to remove what the dog finds reinforcing in order to decrease the likelihood of the behavior. Let's look at another. You bring out the tennis ball, and immediately your dog gets so excited, he starts barking. What ends up happening is you get frustrated and you say, "Oh, be quiet," and you throw the ball. Now, what has the dog learned in this situation? That if he barks at you, you throw the ball. This is perfect. Now the dog will continue barking every time you bring the ball out because it works. How can we modify this behavior? We have to modify our behavior first if we want to change our dog's behavior. So what we'll do is we'll bring out the ball, and if the dog barks, we immediately put the ball away. We don't even have to say anything. And if we do this repeatedly, the dog starts to realize that barking makes the ball go away, and the barking decreases, and perhaps you can ask for a different behavior like a sit or a down, and then that way you can throw the ball for that sit or that down because that's the behavior you want to increase. Now let's take a look at a video that shows me training a chicken to peck a target. Prior to this clip in this video, I've been training the chicken to peck a different target.
Start moving the target around.
Put my hands in there? Freaking crazy, I can pick it.
Ready. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Is this for a minute? Yeah, I picked the bird up. Yeah, there is no question that bird is going for that target.
As you can see, It's not that hard to train an animal to do something that you want them to do. It's all about timing and mechanics and reinforcements. So here I'm using a clicker with a cup of chicken feed, and every time the chicken pecks the target that I want her to peck, I click the second she does it correctly, and then I offer, just for a split second, some feed. She finds that really reinforcing. She's quite hungry today. So she continues to peck that red target because it pays off. If she were to peck the orange target, I would do and say nothing. She would realize fairly quickly that it's not reinforcing, therefore there's no use in doing it. So this is one really interesting example of operant conditioning. Now let's switch gears for a second and talk about dominance. This is a big, dirty word in the dog training industry, and it's really interesting to speak with the public and find out what it really means to you. So let's play a word association game. When you see or hear the word dominance, what do you think of? Throw some words out there. What do you associate with this? Now let's think about some behaviors. What do you consider dominant behaviors when we're talking about dogs? Make a list. You can even hit pause to make that list and see if any of our thoughts line up. Now let's look at our list. What do you consider dominant behaviors in a dog? Would it be walking ahead of you or in front of you on a walk? Pulling on leash? Behaving aggressively? Jumping on the furniture? Humping? Control over resources? Going through doorways first? Marking? These are some of the thoughts that generally come up in conversation when we're talking to clients who are concerned about dominance in their dog. When we label our dog as dominant, we're really sticking a label on them that doesn't quite fit, and it's something we want to really try to avoid. So let's not call our dogs dominant. Let's really think about what that means in the sense of social hierarchies. Dogs evolved from wolves, but they aren't wolves. Dogs are domesticated. They live in our homes, and they wear booties in the winter, and they sleep on beds, and they eat out of bowls that contain the food that we present to them. They're really not considered wolves, and they're not feral either. You may be relieved to learn that dominance is not a concern in domesticated dogs. Dominance is considered the relationship within a group of wild animals, and even to this day, this theory has yet to be proved. Therefore, it's a very loose definition of a familial unit. For example, the word alpha is defined as breeding pair, so there's no way that we can be more alpha to our dogs. This relationship can't be extended cross-species, and we are biologically unable to procreate with another species. So the next time someone tells you to be more alpha to your dog, you can tell them that it's illegal in most countries and quite disgusting, to be frank. So instead of trying to be dominant over your dog or use the term dominant to label your dog's unwanted behaviors, it's far more helpful to take an objective view of your dog's behavior, such as jumping, growling, marking, etc. When we explain a dog's behavior this way, it's much easier to understand what it is exactly that they're doing without having to guess what the word dominant might mean in each context. Let's take a quick stretch break. You're almost there. Let's talk about how we train. We use marker-based training or clicker training because it's been proven to be one of the fastest methods of training any animal, and it's used worldwide in zoos, training schools, service dog programs, police dog programs, and more. The clicker is a small plastic box that when pressed creates a click sound. This click is to be used as an event marker, meaning it marks the exact second that the dog has done the behavior you want them to. Imagine it like a camera, and it's capturing the exact moment you get what you want. It's important that the click happens at the right time. It provides instant feedback to the dog telling them what they did right, and then their paycheck gets delivered. A dog's paycheck in clicker training is a food reward, but it must be small and high value in order to be effective. Why would we use food in training? There are so many reasons. When using food in training, we use very tiny pieces the size of a green pea or even smaller. This allows us to get many repetitions of the behavior, which brings us faster skills. Why not use food when all dogs eat? We can use their regular meals as reinforcements. Eating food that we enjoy increases dopamine in the brain, and that's in our reward center. And we all know that if we're enjoying ourselves, we're learning effectively. Food is also easy to carry as it can fit in a small bait bag or in a pocket. Using food in training is far more effective and enjoyable than using punishment. The first thing that we need to do is to condition the clicker or charge the clicker. This means teaching our dog what the heck does this click mean. Prepare 10 high-value treats and store them in the fridge or another place that doesn't tip your dog off to their existence. Go hang out after you've done this, and later on in the day, when your dog least expects it, click the clicker once, and immediately after that sound, start to jolly your dog up with some happy talk and praise as you head over to the fridge or wherever your treats are hiding. Give your dog a treat right away and then go about your day. Repeat this process. Click the clicker and then happy talk your dog all the way to that fabulous treat. Over time, what's going to happen is your dog is going to hear that click and get really excited about what's in store for them. What if your dog is afraid of the click? This can happen sometimes. So what you'll want to do is wrap it in a towel or a thick cloth until you can barely hear it, and start again. Click the clicker, happy talk them all the way to the treat, and reward them with something delicious. Over time, as your dog starts to respond to the muffled sound by looking for the treat or walking happily with you to find that treat, you'll start to gradually unwrap the clicker. If this is still not working, get in touch with us and we can help you. Here's a quick video of what clicker charging looks like. Notice the sequence of events here with myself and Salinger. I don't touch the food until I have clicked. My hands are empty and still, as they should be during training. I'm not in a rush to get the food to him. It's the timing of the click that matters. Do you think he knows what the click means now? Now let's put the clicker to work. Watch how I maintain the sequence of events, click, reach, feed, and how I'm cueing him to do something that I've already shaped or trained him to do. But I'm using the clicker to mark the exact moment he does the right thing. The food is the paycheck. And then I use another tiny piece of food to reset him physically so I can get another sit out of him. Sit. Yay! Super! Good job. Sit. Wow, you are so fast. You're so fast. Good work. Sit. Sit.
You're the best. You're the best. Yeah. Wussy, wussy, wussy.
Now for the ground rules. 1 click equals 1 treat. Absolutely never click if you're not going to give them a treat right after. It's important that they get paid within about 3 to 5 seconds of the click, if possible. Watch your treat hand. Make sure that that hand goes back to your waist or behind your back or to some sort of home base after you've clicked and fed. You don't want it to hang out in the bait bag or the treat pouch because then your dog is just going to be staring at that the whole time. Clicker training is a 1 person at a time job, so it's best for the dog to have 1 trainer for the moment, and if you're going to switch gears, hand the clicker, the treat pouch, and everything else over to the other person, and you stand back and let them do the work. It's really, really important that your dog doesn't think they have 2 trainers at the same time, otherwise they get confused and they don't know who to look to or listen to. Anyone can take part in training. So you can have 4 people in class, for example, and just take turns training the dog. That's no problem at all. Maybe each of you does 5 repetitions. And then you take a break, hand it off to the next person, and they do 5 repetitions. The clicker is not a remote control. There are no batteries. It doesn't connect to your dog's brain. You don't have to point it at them or have it near their head. In fact, it's better to not have it near their head because their ears are so sensitive. We don't want them finding it aversive. The clicker is also not an attention-getting tool, so you don't want to click it repeatedly to try to get their attention. It's really important that it always means that they've done the right thing and that food is coming. Once the behavior is well trained, put the clicker away. You just bring it out when you want to train a new trick. When you're coming to classes or private lessons, make sure that you are well prepared. Otherwise, you might find training frustrating or stressful. Now is a good time to consider the equipment that you're using with your dog. Puppies are very developmentally delicate. Their bones, joints, and muscles are all still developing until about a year to a year and a half of age. So it's important to not use a collar to attach a leash to, for training or for walks. Collars are really only meant for tags. For puppies under 1 year or 18 months, it's best to use a harness. For puppies in our primary school program, we do require that they are on a harness rather than a collar. For small breeds under 25 pounds, a harness is also really important, as many small breeds have a genetic predisposition to something called tracheal collapse, and using a collar with small breeds like this could cost them their life. Even for extra large breeds like Great Danes, Mastiffs, and St. Bernards, we use front clip harnesses for those larger breeds as it prevents pulling and allows the handler more control. We may also accept head halters such as gentle leaders and halties, depending on the size of the dog and if the dog is comfortable with it. Please use a flat leash anywhere from 6 to 10 feet long. We don't allow retractable or flexi leads in our classrooms and private programs. They don't allow the handler enough control, and in fact, they can unfortunately cause amputations and other serious injuries. If you're not sure, please let us know and we can help you. We can fit your dog into a harness at your first class or session. Please arrive 5 to 10 minutes early in order to do this, as we don't want to do this on your class time. You will need somewhere to put your treats, and a baggie or a pocket is not good enough. Please ensure that you have a treat pouch. These can be purchased at most pet stores or online at Amazon, or if you prefer one that's higher quality and will last a long time, you can purchase one at our school. Your treat pouch should be something that you can get your hand in and out of quickly that isn't too small or narrow of an opening. Some people use fanny packs, however, they have proved to be very frustrating in the past. When you sign up for classes or a private program with us, we will provide you with 2 clickers. As your first class or private session, you might want to arrive a couple minutes early if you've not done your homework with the clicker and properly conditioned it at home. We strongly suggest that you condition the sound of the clicker at home prior to coming so that you save plenty of time and don't miss out on the class. What's your dog's currency? This is a really important question when working with any animal. We must use something that is of high value to the animal, otherwise using something that is mediocre or low value will get you mediocre or low value behavior and skills. We recommend using whole food so that you can prevent your dog from having an upset stomach after a training session. Some examples are boiled chicken breast, ground meats, a cheap cut of beef baked or boiled. Other ideas might be low-fat cheddar cheese cut into tiny pieces smaller than that of a green pea, or slicing and dicing a roll of rollover dog food. Another option is to find the fridge section of many pet stores that may have Fresh Pet or Vital meatballs for dogs. Again, you'll want these treats to be small, soft, and stinky. They should be very appealing for your dog, as you will need to hold their attention in a high distraction environment. See our blog or email us for ideas on how to prepare these foods and store them. These options that we're given are also the least expensive and the healthiest options. If you're worried about your dog eating human food, you can stop worrying now. Chicken, beef, pork, lamb, duck, these are all foods that your dog would naturally be eating. Now, doesn't it seem like kibble is the least natural thing on the planet? If you're concerned about them begging, simply don't feed them when they're begging. Remember that dogs will do what works, and if you reward them for a behavior, they will repeat it. Many people ask if they can just bring kibble to class. We hear this all the time, and we understand why you might want to. However, we have to warn you that your dog will not likely work for kibble, in a distracting environment especially, because they eat it multiple times a day at home, and it's really quite boring and tasteless. At home, your dog may work for kibble, but that's because it's a very calm, relaxed environment for them. When they come to class, it's a lot more exciting. You may still want to bring kibble, and that's okay. Bring it, but please do have a fantastic backup, like boiled chicken breast or delicious meatballs or something of the like. If the treats are crunchy, dense, or hard, your dog will feel that it's too much work and not worth their effort. These are treats that we often see coming into class and dogs turning their nose up at because they're simply too hard, chewy, or dense. They really do find that soft treats are far more rewarding. When coming to classes or private lessons, please bring your dog's mat or bed. If it's too big, certainly feel free to bring a towel instead. We're going to teach your dog how to settle in a distracting environment, but we're also going to teach them how to go to mat and stay, which is a really helpful behavior in any situation. We ask that all clients bring a stuffed Kong, marrow bone, or other type of stuffed food toy so that they can chew on something when we take a break between teaching behaviors. When we allow our dogs a chew break between learning, they will retain 80 to 90% of what they've just learned. If they don't get to chew or sleep or play in between learning, they'll likely only retain about 20% of what they've learned. It really is in your best interest to bring something that's high value that they can chew on. We'll send you a link to an article in our blog that outlines various ideas to stuff Kongs with or other food toys. An empty Kong, a Nyla bone, or a stuffed toy just won't cut it in this environment and doesn't serve the purpose. These are all typical concerns, so let's address them really briefly right now. My dog is not food motivated. Now, oftentimes when we hear this as trainers, we're a little bit concerned because that means the dog doesn't eat at all. Therefore, the dog must be dead. Every dog is food motivated. They eat to sustain life. However, if we just leave their kibble out all day and they can graze whenever they feel like it, kibble has lost its value to them. So it's important that we close the economy on food. Instead of leaving food down for them just to munch on in a bowl, put it in your treat pouch and have them work for their food. Every piece of kibble is earned through behavior. This might take a few days for them to get used to, but it really pays off in the end. This way, they'll start to see food as valuable and they'll want to work for it. My dog doesn't like Kongs. Okay, what are you putting in the Kong? If it's just a plain old Kong with nothing in it, I can completely understand. That's pretty boring. If you're putting something delicious in there that they find delicious, like peanut butter, cream cheese, squeezed cheese, cottage cheese, applesauce, mashed potatoes, whatever is in your fridge that is free of spices and herbs, and you know it's safe for dogs, they might find that more enticing. Oftentimes, we'll even freeze it overnight to make sure that it lasts longer than 5 minutes. My dog doesn't like to rest on mats or beds. No problem. There are often breeds out there like Huskies and Shepherds and Samoyeds and Malamutes who are a little bit too furry or get overheated quickly, and they don't really want to rest on the mat or the bed. Bring it anyway because we're going to be doing mat work and you'll need to use one regardless. I don't want to use food in training. This is a tough one because if we don't want to use food in training, we're basically saying, I don't want to pay my dog for the job that they're doing. Would you go to work if your paycheck stopped coming in? Dogs are food motivated, as we've discussed. They will work for food. And so it's important that we use what they find motivating. If you're asking your dog to do something and your paycheck is not really what they're expecting, you're not going to get much behavior out of them. Professionals like using food because it is one of the most powerful motivators in animal training. The reality is that you get more strongly conditioned behaviors if you don't limit yourself to praise alone. Dogs are not naturally eager to please. That's a myth in dog training. It's not that they're doing things to please us. They're doing it because they're getting rewarded in some way or another. I don't want to give my dog human food. Well, let's look at this. What do you think is in kibble? Let's look at the ingredients and find foods that are human foods. That would be most of them. Dogs are animals who eat real food. Kibble is a recent invention as of World War II, and it's really only for convenience. It doesn't mean that it's the best thing for them. If you're concerned about begging or stealing food, let us help you prevent that easily. If you're really concerned about using human food, then you can certainly purchase dog treats. However, be mindful about how many dog treats you're giving them because they're full of nitrates, preservatives, coloring, and other ingredients that may not be healthy for your dog. That's why we really strongly suggest using whole food. There are other rewards out there. Praise, petting, tug, and play are all fantastic rewards to use in training. However, they have their place and it's not everywhere. Dogs will not work consistently for these the way they will for food. It's nice to have these on hand to use, but let's not rely on them until the behaviors are fluent. Coming to the school. We're located on Carlaw Avenue between Gerrard and Dundas Street East. This is what our main front door looks like, and this is what you should be looking for, the brown siding on the outside. We're located between two Canadian flags. It's a really large industrial building, and so it's important to look for those flags. Come in this door, head down the stairs to your left, and follow the signs to us. That's the fastest way to get to us, where you're not going to get lost in the huge maze. When you come in, please arrive no more than 10 minutes early. Otherwise, you may run into a private session with dogs who may not be terribly friendly. When you come in, hang out in the waiting room. See if you can keep your dog's attention on you, as opposed to having a free-for-all in the waiting room. We'll help you with this. We're a little bit different from the traditional training classes in that we use visual barriers to separate each dog in class. This allows you to have your dog's full attention and to limit distraction during learning. Over time, we may remove the barriers in order to increase the difficulty level of the activity. You'll thank us for this later. You've made it to the end. Thank you for completing this orientation. It'll certainly set you up for success in our classes and programs, and if you need to watch it again down the road, please feel free to do so. Join us on Facebook and Instagram, and if your dog has an Instagram account that you want us to follow, we would love to. Please send us that name in your registration form. We look forward to having you in class soon.